You know that kind of person who walks into a room and without saying a word, the entire atmosphere shifts. They don't need to introduce themselves. They don't need attention. Yet somehow people naturally adjust. Conversations become sharper, posture changes, and there's this quiet awareness in the air that no one can quite explain, but everyone can feel. That kind of presence is not loud, not forced, but undeniably powerful. They don't chase, they don't over explain, and they definitely don't beg for respect, validation, or a place at the table. They already know who they are and what they bring, and strangely enough, the moment they believe it, the world begins to mirror it back to them without needing to be convinced. You've encountered someone like this before, maybe just once, maybe briefly, but they stayed in your mind longer than expected. You kept wondering what made them different. The truth is, they weren't born that way. They were shaped, forged through loss, through betrayal, through reaching that quiet breaking point where giving everything and receiving nothing was no longer an option. At some moment in their life, they made a decision most people avoid. They decided to stop being easy. They stopped being available to everyone, stopped overextending, stopped shrinking themselves just to keep others comfortable. And everything you're about to hear comes from that decision. These are the rules that build that kind of person, and if you're willing, they can rebuild you too. Rule 1: stop giving your energy to people who were never truly in need of it. There's a hard truth here that most people don't want to face. Constant giving is not always kindness. When it becomes automatic, when it comes from fear rather than choice, it turns into self-abandonment disguised as virtue. You're not being generous. You're trying to avoid rejection, conflict, or judgment, and that pattern slowly erodes you from the inside. Take a moment and look honestly at your life, not the relationships that feel balanced, but the ones that drain you. The friend who only appears when they need something, the colleague who takes your ideas as their own, the family member who treats your time as if it has no value, the same people who disappoint you repeatedly, and yet you continue to forgive, hoping this time will be different. Ask yourself why, and if you're truly honest, it's rarely love, it's conditioning. You were taught that being a good person means sacrificing more, enduring quietly, being the bigger person no matter the cost. But what no one told you is how expensive that belief becomes over time. Because when something is always available, always forgiving, always there no matter how it's treated, it loses its value in the eyes of others. Not because people are evil, but because human nature respects what has limits. And without realizing it, you've made yourself into something that's simply expected, like furniture in a room that no one thinks twice about. Your time matters, your energy matters, your presence matters, but only when you start treating it that way first. The moment you begin protecting what you give, people will notice. Some will respect you more, others will become uncomfortable, and that difference will show you exactly who belongs in your life and who is only there for convenience. Stop pouring into people who were never empty. Step back from those who take without returning. Not with anger, not with drama, but with quiet certainty. Because your energy is not something to be handed out freely. It's an investment, and it deserves to be spent with intention. Rule 2: stop seeing your pain as something that broke you, and start seeing it as something that taught you. Every difficult experience you've gone through carries information. Every betrayal exposed something you didn't see before. Every failure revealed a gap in your thinking. Every heartbreak showed you the difference between what you wanted and what you truly needed. The problem is most people stay stuck in the emotional side of pain. They relive it, they attach their identity to it, they let it define them, and over time, it weakens them. But the ones who become strong, the ones who become stable and hard to shake, are the ones who learn to step back and study their pain instead of drowning in it. Think about how successful people handle failure. They don't collapse and give up. They analyze. They ask what went wrong, what they ignored, what assumptions failed, and what needs to change. Then they move forward with clarity. That same process needs to happen in your personal life. That relationship that hurt you deeply wasn't just pain, it was data. It showed you where your boundaries were weak, where you ignored reality in favor of potential, where your insecurities allowed things you should have never accepted. That experience was trying to teach you something. The same goes for every situation that made you feel small or powerless. If you don't extract the lesson, you repeat the pattern. And that's why some people live the same story over and over again with different faces in different places, but the same outcome. So here's what changes everything. When something painful happens, allow yourself to feel it fully, because suppressing it only delays the damage. But once the emotion settles, sit down and ask yourself what this experience revealed, what you missed, what you need to change, and how a stronger version of you would respond next time. Write it down if you have to, because clarity comes from precision, not from vague thoughts. When you do this consistently, pain stops being something that weakens you and becomes something that sharpens you. Rule 3. Learn to use silence, because it is one of the most underestimated forms of power. We live in a world that encourages constant expression, constant sharing, constant explanation, as if speaking more somehow makes you stronger. But that's only partially true, because there's a difference between meaningful openness and unnecessary exposure. The strongest individuals are not the loudest ones. They are the most controlled. They don't reveal everything. They don't rush to fill silence. And they don't feel the need to justify themselves to people who have already chosen not to understand them. They observe more than they speak. And because of that, they see more than most people ever will. Think about the last time you over-explained yourself, trying to make someone understand your decision. You gave reasons, details, context, and yet instead of feeling respected, you felt smaller. That's because over-explaining is often a hidden form of seeking approval, and that energy is something people can sense immediately. Silence, on the other hand, communicates something very different. It shows that you are not shaken, that you are not dependent on validation, that you trust your own judgment enough to stand without defending it. And that kind of certainty makes people pay attention in a completely different way. When someone tries to provoke you, don't react immediately. Hold your ground, maintain eye contact, and let them sit with the discomfort of not getting a response. When a question feels intrusive, you don't owe an answer. A simple boundary is enough, and you can move on without explaining further. You are not required to justify your choices, your boundaries, or your direction in life to people who are not part of your journey. You are not on trial, and the moment you stop acting like you are, everything about how people perceive you begins to change. Maybe it was a career decision. Maybe it was a relationship. Maybe it was something as small as why you didn't reply to a message. You explained yourself in detail, hoping to be understood, but instead of feeling respected, you walked away feeling smaller, exposed, almost like you had given away too much of yourself. That's because over-explaining is rarely about clarity. It's about seeking approval. And the moment you start seeking approval, you unconsciously broadcast insecurity for everyone to feel. Now, understand this clearly. Silence speaks in ways words never can. When you choose not to react, not to explain, not to fill the space, you send a signal that you are grounded, that you are not shaken, that you do not depend on someone else's validation to feel certain about yourself. And that kind of energy doesn't just get noticed, it commands respect in a way that noise never will. People don't fear those who talk the most. Loudness is easy to read, easy to predict, easy to control. What people truly pay attention to, what unsettles them in a quiet way, are those who observe everything but reveal Very little. The ones who listen more than they speak, who smile without overexposing, who make you wonder what they're really thinking because they never rush to show it. Start practicing that kind of silence. When someone tries to provoke you, resist the urge to respond immediately. Hold eye contact, stay composed, and let the moment stretch. Let them sit in the discomfort of not getting the reaction they expected, because that alone shifts the power dynamic without you saying a single word. And when someone asks you something you don't feel like answering, remember this: you are allowed to choose what you share. You can simply say, you'd rather not go into it, and move on. No explanation, no justification, no need to make it easier for them to understand. Not everything about you is public access. Stop explaining your life to people who are not part of building it with you. You don't owe anyone a breakdown of your decisions, your boundaries, or your direction. You are not standing in a courtroom, and you don't need to defend your choices like you're on trial. The moment you stop acting like you need permission, you start carrying yourself differently, and people feel that shift immediately. Rule 4. Detachment is not about becoming cold. It's about becoming free. Most people misunderstand this because they confuse detachment with indifference, when in reality, it's about no longer allowing your emotional state to be controlled by external reactions. Think about someone you know who seems constantly affected by everything around them. When things go well, they feel unstoppable, but the moment something shifts, their entire mood collapses. A message goes unanswered, and they start overthinking. A small criticism appears, and it lingers for days. Their emotional state is constantly being pulled by forces outside of them. That is not strength. That is dependency, disguised as sensitivity. And it keeps people stuck in a loop of reacting instead of living intentionally. Because when your peace depends on something you cannot control, you will never truly feel stable. Detachment changes that completely. It brings your center back to you. It means your confidence, your sense of worth, your emotional balance are no longer borrowed from how others treat you, but built from how you see yourself. And once that foundation is internal, it becomes much harder for anything external to shake it. Imagine what your life would feel like if rejection didn't linger, if criticism didn't define your day, if someone's disapproval simply didn't carry that much weight anymore. That is not unrealistic. It is a skill that can be developed, and it starts with awareness. Every time you notice yourself craving a reaction from someone, whether it's approval, attention, or reassurance, pause and question it. Ask yourself what you are trying to receive from them that you haven't yet given to yourself, because that answer will always point you back to where your power actually is. Sometimes you're looking for reassurance, so learn to trust your own decisions instead of outsourcing that trust. Sometimes you want to feel valued, so remind yourself of your progress, your effort, your consistency, because you already have evidence of your worth if you choose to see it. And here's the part most people don't expect. The moment you stop needing something from others, you become more attractive to them, because neediness pushes people away, while grounded self-assurance naturally draws them in. When you're no longer chasing, you become someone worth noticing. So stop chasing what is already walking away. Stop asking for what should be given freely. Focus on your path, your growth, your direction, and let everything else fall into place without forcing it. Rule 5. Boundaries are not walls. They are clarity about who you are. At its core, a boundary is simply a decision about what you will accept and what you will not tolerate. Yet most people never take the time to define that clearly for themselves. Instead, they adapt to everyone else. They say yes when they feel no. They allow behaviors that drain them. And over time, they begin to feel exhausted, resentful, and unseen without fully understanding why. The truth is, that feeling comes from living without defined limits. People avoid setting boundaries because they fear the reaction. They worry about being rejected, misunderstood, or labeled as difficult. And sometimes those reactions will happen. But those reactions reveal something important that you cannot afford to ignore. The people who resist your boundaries are often the ones who benefited from you not having any. Your silence made things easier for them. Your flexibility gave them room to take more than they should have. And the moment you change that, the balance shifts. That discomfort you feel when you finally say no, when you finally stand your ground, that is the cost of self-respect. And while it may feel uncomfortable in the moment, it protects you from something far worse, which is slowly losing your sense of worth over time. Start small if you need to. Find one situation where you've been compromising yourself, and the next time it happens, respond differently. Not emotionally, not aggressively, but clearly and calmly. A simple statement is enough, and you don't need to explain beyond that. Then observe what follows. Some people will respect you more, and those are the people worth keeping close. Others will push back, test you, or try to make you feel guilty, and that tells you exactly where they stand. Boundaries are not about controlling anyone else. They are about defining yourself. Every time you set one, you are making a statement about your standards, your values, and how you expect to be treated. And when you hold that line consistently, people either adjust or they step away. Rule 6. Learn to stay calm when it matters most, because your composure is one of the strongest forms of control you will ever have. Anger itself is not wrong. It often points to something that matters, something that has been crossed. But reacting without thinking is where most people lose their advantage. Every time you react impulsively, you reveal your weak points. You show what affects you, what triggers you, where you can be influenced. And in any situation that involves pressure, conflict, or negotiation, that puts you at a disadvantage immediately. Real strength is not about suppressing your emotions. It's about feeling them fully, but choosing your response instead of being driven by it. That separation between feeling and action is what gives you control in moments where others lose it. So, when something triggers you, pause. Even a few seconds is enough. Take a breath, not to calm down completely, but to create space between what you feel and what you do. Then ask yourself, what response actually benefits you in the long term, not just what feels satisfying right now. Sometimes that response is silence. Sometimes it's a calm, direct statement. Sometimes it's walking away without engaging at all. But most of the time, it is not the reaction your emotions are pushing you toward in the moment. When you practice this consistently, you become harder to provoke, harder to read, harder to control. And that alone shifts how people interact with you. They begin to approach you differently because they can no longer predict or manipulate your reactions. And something else happens quietly in the background. When others lose control and you remain steady, you naturally become the person people look to. Not because you demanded authority, but because you demonstrated it. And that is where true influence begins. This is not about suppressing what you feel, because suppressing emotions never makes them disappear. It only delays them until they come back stronger and harder to control. What this is really about is learning how to process what you feel and then consciously choose how you respond instead of reacting automatically like most people do. The difference may seem small, but it changes everything. Because the moment you stop reacting and start choosing, you take back control over your behavior, your outcomes, and ultimately your life. Here's what that looks like in practice. The next time something triggers you, whether it's a rude comment, bad news, or someone crossing a line, your first move is not to respond, but to pause. Even a few seconds is enough to break the automatic reaction. Take a breath, not because you need to instantly calm down, but because you need to shift from reacting emotionally to thinking strategically. In that space, ask yourself, one simple but powerful question: what response here actually serves me in the long run instead of just satisfying me in the moment? Sometimes the best response is saying nothing at all. Sometimes it's a calm and direct statement that sets the tone without escalating the situation. And sometimes the strongest move is simply walking away and refusing to engage. But almost never is the best choice. The immediate emotional reaction that your body is pushing you toward, that reaction may feel powerful for a second, but it often costs you much more afterward. People who learn this skill become incredibly difficult to deal with in the best way possible, not because they are cold or disconnected, but because they feel everything and still choose how they act. That level of control is rare, and people can sense it even if they can't explain it. There is also a hidden advantage that most people overlook. When you stay calm in situations where others expect you to react, you naturally take on a kind of authority. You become the steady point in the room, the person others unconsciously look to when things get tense. That is leadership in its purest form. Not loud, not forced, not performative, but grounded, controlled, and consistent. And anyone can develop it if they are willing to do the internal work. Your composure is not just a personality trait, it is leverage. And if you protect it, it will protect you in return. Rule 7. It's time to redefine what loyalty actually means, because most people have been taught a version of loyalty that quietly works against them. They treat it like a permanent contract, something that once given must be honored no matter how the situation changes. They stay loyal to people who disrespect them, to environments that drain them, to systems that no longer align with who they are becoming, all because they fear being labeled as disloyal if they walk away. But that kind of loyalty is not strength. It is self-abandonment, disguised as virtue. Real loyalty is not blind, and it is not unconditional. It is a response to consistent respect, mutual value, and alignment over time. It is something that is earned and maintained, not something that is blindly given and never questioned again. When someone shows up for you, respects you, and values what you bring, loyalty becomes natural. It feels right, it flows both ways, and it strengthens the relationship. But when those things disappear, continuing to stay loyal is no longer honorable, it is damaging. You see this most clearly in environments like work, where people give years of their life, sacrifice their time, their energy, even their well-being, believing their loyalty will be returned. And yet, when circumstances change, they are replaced without hesitation. That's because the system was always transactional, even if they chose to see it as something deeper. And that disconnect is what causes so much unnecessary pain. Your first loyalty must always be to yourself, to your growth, your values, and your long-term direction. Everything else, every relationship, every opportunity, every commitment should earn its place in your life through consistent action. And that also means you must be willing to reevaluate, not emotionally, not impulsively, but honestly. If something no longer aligns with who you are becoming, it is okay to step away without guilt and without drama. Because the goal is not to hold on at all costs. The goal is to remain whole, to not lose yourself while trying to preserve something that has already changed. Rule 8. Build an identity that cannot be taken from you, because everything else in life can and will change. Roles change, relationships shift, circumstances evolve, and anything built entirely on those external things will eventually become unstable. Most people build their identity on what they do, who they are connected to, or how others see them. And as long as those things remain intact, they feel secure. But the moment one of them disappears, everything collapses, and they are left questioning who they really are. An internally grounded identity works differently. It is not based on titles, status, or validation. It is built on values, on consistent behavior, and on how you choose to show up regardless of the situation. It is defined by how you act when no one is watching, how you use your time when you have freedom, how you respond when things go wrong, and what you stand for when it costs you something. When your identity is built this way, it doesn't break when circumstances change. It adapts. Rejection doesn't define you, it redirects you. Failure doesn't end you, it teaches you. Loss doesn't destroy you, it reshapes you. Because at your core, you are still intact. And that changes how you move through everything in life. Everything we've talked about leads to this: protecting your energy, learning from pain, mastering silence, detaching from outcomes, setting boundaries, staying calm, redefining loyalty. All of it is preparation for becoming someone who cannot be easily shaken. You are not here to shrink yourself so others feel comfortable. You are not here to tolerate disrespect and call it strength. You are here to build something meaningful, to stand for something real, and to become someone who moves through life with clarity and self-respect. The world will test you. It always does. But the difference now is that you won't respond the same way anymore. Not because you've become cold, but because you've become grounded and intentional. And when you reach that level, you don't just survive the world. You move through it on your own terms, with a sense of direction and a strength that doesn't need to be announced for others to feel it.